my favorite fan letter I opened it up, and there was a marijuana cigarette glued to a piece of cardboard and a photo of a very delightful-looking young girl. And she said, "You have turned me on so many times, I thought I would return the favor."
He was born Jackson DeForest Kelley, named after electronics engineer Lou DeForest, on January 20, 1920, in Atlanta, Georgia, to a Baptist minister father whose church was in Conyers, Georgia. Kelley revealed musical talent early on and frequently sang in morning church services. Originally intending to become a doctor, he gave up that idea when it became clear that the family couldn't afford to send him to medical school. So, with his mother's encouragement, he would try out singing on local radio shows. This would lead to an engagement at the Paramount Theater in Georgia. "She used to take me down to the radio stations and amateur shows," he told the Atlanta Constitution in 1947. "She would make me sing, insisting, 'You can do it.'" In 1934, the family moved to Decatur, Georgia, where he attended Decatur Boys High School, participating on the school's baseball and football teams while working as a drugstore delivery boy and in local theaters. In a profile that appeared in the Los Angeles Times on June 16, 1946, they noted, "The story of DeForest Kelley is a super saga, which began when he was an elevator operator in Long Beach. Next door was the Long Beach Players Guild. Kelley went to rehearsal one day without thinking of going on stage. Someone felt he looked like Ned, a character in Holiday. He played the role of several others. William Melkajohn of Paramount saw him and became interested. Melkajohn," they continued, "is a man who believes in off-casting Kelley, an unusual type, made 12 different auditions at Paramount, but nothing happened. Then Kelley went in the service. He was assigned as a control tower operator first. Later, he was transferred to the Army Film Unit in Culver City, a deal in which Melkajohn played a part. I added to the Atlanta Journal that same year. He appeared in a number entitled Time to Kill."
Will you do something for me? Sure, kid. What is it? Will you write a letter for me?
I do what?
Letter, will you write a letter for me?
The picture was directed by Will Jason, a veteran Hollywood professional, and he showed the rushes of the film to Paramount. When Kelley was discharged from the Army, a contract awaited him. Kelley joked to the Toledo Union Journal, "I'm the guy who had to get in the Army to become a movie actor." In between all of this, it should be noted that while he was at the Long Beach Players Guild, he met actress Carolyn Dowling, who had a part in a play he was in. In a closing scene, she said, "Here, take this $10 and get married." According to the Atlanta Journal, he forgot to give her back her $10 and called her up later to tell her to meet him and get her money. She did, but they decided to spend it for a marriage license. The duo were wed in 1945 and remained together until the death of DeForest Kelley.
All right, Sheriff. Reach. Horseface, get his keys. Unlock the cell. Inside.
But you're not particular about which Indians you find, are you?
The way I look at it, an Indian's an Indian. Any one of them alive's too many.
That'd do a lot of good, wouldn't it, Bailey? Start an Indian war all over again?
Westerns became an important factor in the career of DeForest Kelley. In 1949, he guest starred on The Lone Ranger, and then he portrayed villainous parts in such genre films as Gunfight at the OK Corral, portraying Morgan Earp, brother to Burt Lancaster's Wyatt, and Raintree County, The Law and Jake Wade, Warlock in Gunfight at Comanche Creek. The list went on from there, to include Black Spurs, Town Tamer in Apache Uprising, and Johnny Reno in Waco. He didn't shy away from westerns on television, appearing in episodes of Gunsmoke, Dick Powell's Zane Grey Theater, The Adventures of Jim Bowie in Boots and Saddles, Track Down, The Rough Riders, and Tales of Wells Fargo.
This Piper's had trouble with women before. He's a dirty little animal. I'd plead him guilty to that. But the charge happens to be murder.
The first attempt of DeForest Kelley to star in his own series was in the form of 1960's 333 Montgomery, a TV pilot featuring him as Jake Britton, a San Francisco defense attorney who takes on seemingly impossible cases, starting with a man accused of murder. The intended show was based on the career of real-life attorney Jake Ehrlich. Of the show, a publicist said, 333 Montgomery will not be a crime, detective, mystery, or courtroom series. Although it will involve all these areas, the focus is on the man. The concept didn't go to series, the pilot airing as an episode of Alcoa Theater on June 13, 1960. Historically significant about this show is the fact that it was written by Gene Roddenberry, who the actor credits for seeing beyond his frequent role as a Western baddie. This concept was before The Defenders, and it was controversial in nature and ahead of its time, said Kelley. Roddenberry wrote it and produced it, and I starred in it. Unfortunately, it did not sell, but that was really the first pull out of Westerns for me. And then later, of course, Gene did Star Trek. The first episode of Star Trek to be filmed was the 1964 pilot The Cage, which featured Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike and Leonard Nimoy as Vulcan Science Officer Mr. Spock. Cast as Enterprise Chief Medical Officer, Philip Boyce was actor John Hoyt, despite Roddenberry's desire for Kelley to play the part. I'm not proud of this, admits the pilot's director, Robert Butler, but as I was casting the Doctor, I was against DeForest Kelley being cast, the person Gene Roddenberry wanted. As a younger guy, I guess I felt that he was somewhat heavier. I remember thinking that he was somewhat earthbound. Maybe I thought his youth at the time defied reality somewhat, whereas if we got a seasoned veteran in there, that might bring us a great spread of reality in your main people. I remember Gene stood up for DeForest to the end, but ultimately, he backed me and went with John Hoyt. Must read. My Lunch with Kate Mulgrew, owning the havoc she wreaked on the Star Trek set, reflects Star Trek's first story editor, John D.F. Black. DeForest Kelley was as experienced an actor as possible. He had gone from a juvenile to a young leading man and was on Star Trek, where he received enormous training. He had his character in hand, although it changed slightly during the first 5 or 6 episodes, where he became a tad more earnest. The conflict built in between Spock and him was electric. Adds Kelley, the character was laid out by Roddenberry, of course, and there was a guide that went into a good deal of detail about each character. But I remember having long discussions with Gene about McCoy. One thing we had both arrived at, and which was indicated in the breakdown, was that McCoy was supposed to be something of a future-style H.L. Mencken. So I went to the library and read about him and tried to work some of the more personal writing about Mencken into the characterization of McCoy.
Did he ever run and play like the human children, even in secret?
Well, he did have a pet sailor he was very fond of.
Solid?
It's sort of a fat teddy bear.
A teddy bear?
He felt the character really took shape about 6 or 7 episodes in but evolved from its original conception, where he was supposed to be the least military of anyone, wearing oversized sweaters and such. We never got to that part about how he dressed, Kelley says. In addition to that sardonic type wit, I tried to inject as much warmth as I could give him at the proper times and a sense of great caring. Bill and Leonard are the fine actors they are, and there seemed to be a certain chemistry that fell into place among us. It all came together, and each of us had this feeling of unity at the beginning of Trek, of trying to make it as fine a show as possible.
Dr. McCoy, I believe you're enjoying all this.
Indeed, Captain. I've never seen him look so happy.
Shut up.
Well, what do you know? I finally got the last word.
In simpler language, Captain, they drafted me.
They didn't.
This was your idea. This was your idea, wasn't it?
One of the most exciting dynamics from the original Star Trek was the back and forth between McCoy and Spock. The Spock-McCoy situation is a thing that started with a tiny moment, he reflects. It was just a line that he threw at me, and I, in turn, threw it back in a certain manner. Nobody thought much about it at the time, but when it hit the screen, it created an uproar. So they started to build on it and put more of that in. We all gave much input to our characters, but Gene Roddenberry laid them out for us initially and tried to keep us on track. Well, it worked, with the actor becoming an integral part of Star Trek, connecting with the audience significantly. Mark Altman, co-host of the famous Star Trek podcast and Glorious Treksperts and showrunner of the upcoming TV series Deathlands, points out, There may have been a lot of abuse between the cast of the original series, but none of that was ever directed at DeForest Kelley. His fellow universally beloved him castmates and got along with everyone. He was also someone the fans adored, and it's not hard to see why. He loved his fans, and that mutual love played no small role in that. Beginning with season 2, he found that his billing on the show had changed. DeForest Kelley was almost like a neglected stepchild on Star Trek, points out pop culture historian Jeffrey Mark. NBC and Desilu promoted Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy because their parts were larger, and the press was having a field day with how sexy and romantic they were to audiences at home. But DeForest was often the heart of the show, and Dr. McCoy was the lead character who was allowed to show emotion and sometimes be both the heart and the conscience of the show. It was a just move that he was given billing at the top of the show after the first season. Ultimately, he elaborates, after the end of Star Trek, realizing the material would never be as good as what he was given on the show, Night of the Lepus, an awful film about killer bunnies, would be his last non-Trek project. He quietly left the stage, only appearing every few years in Trek films. This would be his swan song on the silver screen, except for a brief and moving cameo in the Next Generation premiere he did as a favor for Gene Roddenberry, with whom he had always remained close.
I don't see no points on your ears, boy, but you sound like a Vulcan.
No, sir. I'm an android.
Kelley noted to the media, "The stuff offered to me after the series ended was crap, and I thought, I've done so much crap, I don't need to do that again. Fortunately, I learned a long time ago in this business that when you make some money, you had better put a little bit aside. I'm not talking about living in Bel Air, I'm talking about living a nice normal life. I thought Star Trek had stopped feeding me at the end of 3 years." He added to the online Ion Movies, "Most people are under the impression that we received and are still receiving residuals from the show, which we are not. See, they ceased. That was before residuals were given to actors in perpetuity. So we just thought it was a show that had sadly gone. And then there was this rebirth. That rebirth would include the rise of Star Trek conventions, from which DeForest Kelley would pull in about $50,000, the equivalent of $240,000 today, a year, and revivals in the form of the 1973 to 1974 Saturday morning animated version of the show. Director J.J. Abrams would relaunch the franchise on the big screen in 2009 with a new cast portraying the classic characters, including Chris Pine as Kirk, Zachary Quinto as Spock, and Carl Urban as McCoy. Carl Urban's McCoy, says Altman, is a love letter to Kelley. It's a warm embrace of the iconic character DeForest created and reflects Urban's deep passion for the franchise. In 1991, DeForest Kelley was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and, in 1999, a Golden Boot Award for his contributions to the Western genre on both the big screen and the small. As noted, he and wife Carolyn were together until the end, which came for him on June 11, 1999, at age 79, of stomach cancer.
Once again, we've saved civilization as we know it.
And the good news is they're not going to prosecute.
One interesting observation. DeForest Kelley seemed amused by the way the critics responded to each subsequent Star Trek film, increasingly focusing on the fact that the cast was getting older. "We don't care about a critic's review," Kelley said. "We only hope that it pleases you. They've critiqued our bellies, wrinkles, and hair, but we keep going. We don't care. I don't suppose they've ever been told that all of us are growing old. It seems to me the thing worth knowing is to try to keep on growing." That was our show. What did you think? Were you a DeForest Kelley fan? What role, other than Dr. McCoy, did you enjoy from DeForest Kelley? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section, and I'd be honored if you subscribe to my channel, click the bell to stay informed, and check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise, also in the comments. Until next time, this is Axel for Kevin Given saying live long and prosper. May the force be with you and keep reaching for the stars.